episode 296. Strange Times. Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining me. Hope you're all doing okay. As I record this, it's 2020. We've still got the COVID. We're sort of in the second wave. Certainly in Europe, there's maybe a few cases peaking, but there's less people going into hospital, less people dying, which is it's fantastic, you know. So I'm hopeful we're gonna get through this, you know. It's been a tough struggle now, I think, for everybody, and on lots of different levels, you know. So I'm hopeful we've got this. I'm hopeful we can do this. So yeah, and I hope. Well, you know, they say COVID will be with us for a while. I did read some interesting reports from the UK. Oxford University is doing some trials of its vaccination. It's doing in the UK and in America, and a huge trial. So they're definitely ramping up the whole process. So I'm very pleased about that, and hopefully that'll get us to some level of normality. So this podcast, Strange Times, and it is Strange Times, isn't it? But the reason it sort of came to mind to me for this podcast, a few things really, actually. You know, I mean, people are wearing masks around the place. I never thought I'd see that in Ireland. Going into Lidl and places like that, and going into shops. It's funny. It's a funny thing, you know, and social distancing, keeping 2 meters away. I mean, bear in mind that Ireland is a very welcoming, very social country. You know, it's like having something important taken away. You know, it's incredible, and it's terrible to see. I mean, I've lived here now for 20 years. I've been coming to Ireland for nearly 30. And yeah, I find that tough now. You know, we're all into following the rules to keep the COVID at bay. But it's sort of heartbreaking to see people with face masks and social distancing, and it's a tough one, you know. And I suppose the last, I mean, we in some ways we're trying to have some level of normality, like a lot of countries, and slowly things have been opened up a little bit, you know. You can now go to shops and stuff and whatever, you know, and there's restaurants and places that serve food. Okay, you might have to wear a mask if you're in a shop, whatever. Okay, that's fine, you know, whatever it takes, you know. One of the last things that's been delayed that hasn't been opened is pubs, you know. And I was on Twitter this evening making quite futile attempts at promoting my podcasts. But I was on Twitter anyway, and it's sort of trending at the moment. There's a hashtag about, you know, open the pubs, you know, and I saw a lot of negativity, if I'm honest. The general consensus from a lot of people was drink at home, you know. Don't be stupid. Let's not open the pubs. Let's keep this at bay, you know. I understand that, you know. But it's not as simple as that, you know. I work with a guy, and he, it's been killing him not having the pubs open, you know. And he was telling me the story that, you know, he doesn't drink, really, you know. But on a Saturday, his thing was to go to a pub, socialise with his friends and stuff in the pub, have a few pints, and that was it, you know. And he hasn't been able to do it now since March, and he's finding it very stressful, you know. And in some ways, he's drinking more at home now, and that was another concern, you know. Because he restricted himself to just drinking in the pub, well, now he's buying it in the supermarket, you know, and he's drinking at home, which isn't good, of course. But there's another side to pubs in Ireland and lots of countries, and I don't see it being mentioned anywhere in the media or anything like that. There's talk about the jobs, which is horrible. People have been out of work and everything else, and that's definitely a big reason to, you know, reopen the pubs. But there is something else, and it's around mental health, and it's around predominantly men's mental health. And so basically, you know, if you have a rough idea about Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, most of the population is in Dublin. You know, I don't know if it's 50%. It probably wouldn't be too far off that. And then the rest is spread across Ireland. There's a few biggish cities. You've got Galway, Cork, Limerick, you know. But it's quite a spread out country, you know. It's very rural. And there was a lot of debate for many years around drink driving. And obviously I'll never condone drinking and driving. But in a rural community where you might live, I don't know, 5 miles away from the local pub, and the local pub isn't about getting drunk and falling over. It's a social side of things, And for some people, and a lot of men in the rural communities, it's their only social outlet, And it's been gone. It's been closed down. It's gone. And I think what maybe isn't realised in a lot of countries and around the world is that we have a hidden problem in Ireland around suicide and mental health, and I call it the hidden pandemic. I was calling it that before COVID, and the biggest concern I have is that it can only get worse. So I have a little story to tell. I do mention other podcasts, but I used to work for Hewlett Packard. I worked there for about 12, 13 years. So about 15 years ago, I was working for them, and at the time, the site had about 2,000 or 3,000 people, which you didn't really know. I mean, my building maybe had, 300 or 400 people, some of which you'd know to see and say hello to, And then you'd have maybe about 50 to 100 people who you might deal with on a day-to-day basis, and you sort of get to know, and I'm happy to say I got to know a lot of people there, But then there was one guy I was working with, and we was chatting one day, and I don't know if it was a Monday or Tuesday, beginning of the week, And he said to me, remember your man, the guy from a couple of rows down? Now, I didn't know his name, but I knew him to see, and I'd say hello to him, He said, yeah, he was in an accident at the weekend, Yeah, he's dead, and it was sort of a shock whenever you hear that, I mean, probably not a massive shock in the sense of I didn't know him, but I knew him to see, and you sort of go, what the hell happened, And he was telling me then about the single vehicle accident, And I hadn't heard of this before. This was sort of new to me, And he was saying, so basically, I don't know what it was, 2 or 3 in the morning on a Sunday morning, he got in his car, he went for a drive, and drove off the road, hit a wall, and he was killed instantly, and no alcohol taken. And the police, the guards, they do appeal for witnesses, and it's called a single car collision, I think, single car accident, whatever. And he was telling me, this guy, said, well, he was suicide, I said, what, But it's not recorded as suicide, and that for me is the problem here, So basically, yeah, so this turns out, and as I learned as the years have gone by and hearing on the news, and, and it's mostly men now, I think men are, I know myself, men can be very guarded with their emotions, and I don't think a lot of it's consciously necessarily, and I don't think it's the way you're brought up. I certainly wasn't brought up to hide my emotions, I know that for sure. But I find it very hard to cry, and sometimes it can be hard showing me emotions, and sometimes you feel consciously, subconsciously, you have a weight on your shoulders, you might be earning money, supporting people, and it's a huge pressure that you don't necessarily realise, But I always love to cry. I mean, I don't cry very often, and I can't make myself cry. And times I have, I was in a funeral a couple of years ago, and I bawled my eyes out, and it's what I needed. I was grieving, and it was also a great relief. Afterwards, the feeling is incredible. I do wish I could cry more, but men don't. Most men don't. It's one of those things, and most men don't talk about how they're feeling. They don't talk about how down they might be or depressed or anything like that, But it was only the years since, after it's been highlighted to me about these single car accidents, that you start to realise how common they are, And I cringe, and just every time I hear about them, I find it quite very upsetting, And the answer to me is, the answer is it's about men's health, men's mental health, isn't it? That's the answer. But the fact that it's not been recorded as a suicide, I find that very upsetting. It's a silent pandemic. This has been going on long before COVID, and I'm sure it's going on in many other countries as well. But, so we're now in a situation where mostly men now in rural Ireland, the pub was the centre of their social network in many ways. It was the place they went at the weekends, maybe even during the week in the village, wherever that they lived. And you know what, just talking to people, talking to the barman, whatever. It's surprising, just talking rubbish, how cathartic it is and how it's important for your mental health. And since March, anyway, the pubs have been shut, and it's now September, and I think they need to reopen. I think it's time they reopened. And it's nothing to do about having a drink or getting drunk or you're an alcoholic or, I've seen a lot of negativity on Twitter. Well, you see a lot anyway, don't you? You give people a voice and they just talk some rubbish. But I'm hopeful. There are signs that pubs will be reopening shortly. I won't be going to pub. I'm, rarely at a pub. But I think for the mental health of a large portion of society, a lot of men and women, I'm sure as well now, just my experience, predominantly it seems to be lots of men, who have, shall we say, taken their own lives in a way that isn't counted as a suicide, isn't statistically counted, is a silent pandemic. So I'm hopeful that over the next few days the government will make the right decision and open pubs again. I'm sure Dublin's the same. I'm sure there are men in Dublin, as well as those down the country. But it's just for mental health and well-being. I think it's often overlooked, the part that the pub has to play in life and in your social life. Especially around men and the mental health. So I'm hopeful that's going to happen. But we live in such strange times. And having thought about the silent pandemic before this pandemic, it scares me to think, the longer this goes on. So next time someone says to you, we need to open the pubs in Ireland, we genuinely really do. Thank you for listening.